How to Stay Invisible, Chapter 2. Raymond snapped awake at the sound of car tires on gravel. A burgundy Honda was creeping into the gravel side lot, the first one there. Raymond sat frozen as memories of the day before flooded him. His heart began to thump. He was certain the driver would see him sitting in the dugout. Rosie could feel Raymond's stress. Her ears stood straight up, and she nudged his leg, whining, "Shh, Rosie, they'll see us." She whimpered again. "Quiet, girl," he pleaded. He put his hand reassuringly on her neck, and she fell silent. "Don't move," Raymond whispered. His science teacher, Mr. Rosen, got out of the car whistling and walking to the side door. He let himself into the school without a backward glance. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, Raymond sprang up from the bench. "Come on, girl." He grabbed the duffel, his book bag, and his fishing pole and took off in the direction of the woods behind the field. Raymond paced the tree line as the sun rose. His ears were ringing again. He tried to concentrate, but he felt dizzy. Rosie stayed close behind him. He tried to tell her it would be all right, but no sound came out. His head was pounding so loudly that he knew someone would hear it. He bent and heaved in the dry leaves, gripping a tree trunk. He slumped to the ground and tried to pull in slow breaths of air. Rosie lay down beside him, pushing her back against his legs. He rubbed her head. "Good girl," he said over and over, finding his voice. "Good girl, good girl, good girl." Raymond took a deep breath. He would just have to look for his parents after school. He could still get a warm breakfast if he went to school, and the thought made his stomach clench. He opened his duffel and pulled out a clean shirt. He ran the dry toothbrush over his teeth and tongue and winced at the taste of bile clinging to his throat. That would have to be good enough. He closed up the duffel, set it against a large tree, and piled leaves on top of it to disguise it. He propped his fishing pole up against another tree close by. "Stay here," he said to Rosie as he lifted his book bag onto his shoulder. "I'll be back after school." She whimpered in protest, but lay down by the pile of leaves covering the duffel. Her fur was good camouflage. Raymond turned toward the school. Getting into the middle school from the woods wasn't as hard as Raymond thought it would be. He walked just inside the tree line, concealing himself until he reached the edge of the woods by the bus lot. He watched as the buses pulled in. Their brakes hissed as they finished for the morning. He waited for kids to pile off, and then he slipped into the crowd and into the school cafeteria. He made himself eat the pancakes slowly, worried that he would vomit again. He took a bite of a sausage patty and then wrapped the rest of it in a napkin, tucking it away for Rosie. He drank all of his milk and peeled an orange, devouring the whole thing. "Want mine?" a boy asked from the other side of the table. "I don't really like oranges, or any fruit for that matter, but they always make you get it even if you don't want it." The boy was taller than Raymond by about a foot, and Raymond could tell he was too skinny even sitting down. He had a country accent, and his collarbones stood out, prominent from the faded Dale Earnhardt Jr. racing shirt that hung off of him, at least 2 sizes too big. The boy held the orange out to Raymond. "Your name's Raymond, right? You're in my art class." Raymond couldn't remember seeing the boy in art class, but then again, he never paid much attention to other kids. He tried to keep his head down at school, blend in. Moving around as much as he did never left much room for making friends, and Raymond was out of practice. Raymond reached out and took the orange. "Thanks," he said. "I'm Harlan," the boy said. It was quiet for a few seconds, and then, "You like cars?" Raymond shrugged. "You watch racing?" Harlan asked, taking a bite of his pancake and talking with his mouth full. "No, not really," said Raymond. "I love cars and pretty much anything to do with racing. One day I'm going to fix me up a Chevrolet Camaro and race it at Talladega. That's in Alabama. You ever been to Alabama? Where are you from anyway?" Harlan was one of those people who didn't take breaths between sentences or bites. "We move around a lot." "That must be cool." I ain't never left River Mill. My dad said he would take me one town over to Commerce for a race, but he never did. That's the closest I've ever been to getting anywhere other than here. I live with my gran. She's my dad's mom and never met my mom's folks. Raymond nodded. Thanks again for the orange, he said, getting up. Harlan swallowed. Bye then, he called cheerfully. Raymond wanted to get away from Harlan, and he needed to go to the bathroom before homeroom. He threw the styrofoam tray in the trash can and slipped past the crowd of students coming in from being dropped off out front. They were hovering around a big River Mill Winter Jamboree and Bingo Night poster on the wall in the hallway. In the bathroom, Raymond splashed water on his face. He sniffed himself. He pulled some brown paper towels from the dispenser and pumped some soap onto them. He unzipped his coat and pulled his t-shirt forward, rubbing the paper towels under his armpits. After he rinsed himself off again, he adjusted his shirt and tried to comb his wiry blonde hair with his fingertips. He needed a hairbrush and some deodorant. In math, Raymond's first class of the day, the other students were chatting about their plans for the weekend or excitedly talking about the winter jamboree. Schoolwork had always come naturally to Raymond, and he was usually placed in all the advanced classes. The kids in those classes never paid much attention to him, and he preferred it that way. Sure, there was always an initial interest in the new kid, but Raymond sat, as he always did, avoiding conversation, quietly completing his work without asking questions. Kids usually moved on quickly from being interested in Raymond, and River Mill was no different. Be ready for a quiz, his math teacher reminded them at the end of class. Mr. Brewer was an ex-football coach and treated his class like a football game. Drill, drill, drill. The whole class groaned and Mr. Brewer smirked. Pays to study, he barked before dismissing them. The rest of the day seemed to go by very quickly. Raymond moved through each class in a fog, hardly paying attention to Mr. Rosen in science. Nobody asked him any questions, and he didn't raise his hand. For lunch, they had sliced turkey and potatoes. He slipped the roll in his pocket with the sausage for Rosie. In English, Miss Marcus displayed the question of the day on the board, and all the kids got out their notebooks to record their answers. This is how they started each class. The questions were usually simple enough. Things like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Today, the question was, if you could have anything in the world that you wanted, what would it be? Raymond wrote, toothpaste. But then thinking that Miss Marcus might actually read his entry, he hastily erased it and stared down at the paper. Anything in the world? Parents? Raymond thought. But he couldn't write that either. He scribbled down spaghetti and passed his notebook up the row for collection. Miss Marcus had a pretty typical classroom. There were quotes from famous authors on the walls and a few posters reminding students to check for grammatical errors. The desks were in neat rows and everything was incredibly clean for a middle school classroom. Miss Marcus was younger than most of the teachers at River Mill and had a soft demeanor that reminded Raymond of an elementary school teacher he once had. Despite her appearance, she had a reputation for being strict but fair. On the rare occasion that anyone tested her reputation, they quickly learned never to cross her again. Somehow, she did this without ever yelling. Raymond liked that about her, and he liked that her classroom was quiet. Miss Marcus took up the notebooks and began passing out papers. Good work, Raymond, she said when she reached his desk. She handed him the vocabulary quiz they had taken the day before. The grade 100 was circled in red at the top of the page. She lowered her voice. You did better than most, and you weren't even here for half of these words. Raymond tucked the quiz into his bag before anyone else could see it, and Miss Marcus continued down the row. His last class of the day was art. When Harlan came into the room, he sat down next to Raymond. Hey, buddy, he said with a grin as he dropped his things, scattering them across the table. Whoops, sorry about that. He reached across Raymond to retrieve his pencil. They began working on a collage project, cutting up pictures from magazines. It was supposed to be a self-reflection, and Harlan's poster was covered in cars. Raymond felt blank. He thumbed through the magazines, but couldn't bring himself to cut out a single picture. Raymond? Raymond looked up. Can't you hear? Harlan asked. I must have called your name like 4 times. Oh, sorry, said Raymond. I asked if you was going to cut anything out. Oh, yeah, sorry, said Raymond. He grabbed the scissors and absent-mindedly started cutting from a magazine page. You got a kid brother or something? Asked Harlan. What? It's just you're cutting out a Pampers advertisement. Harlan half smiled and raised an eyebrow. Oh, yeah, no, said Raymond, and he balled up the paper. You're funny, Harlan said, and then he launched into more car talk, picking up where he left off at breakfast. When the bell rang, Raymond put his blank poster back on the pile in the middle of the table. He grabbed his book bag and made his way to the door. See you tomorrow, Harlan yelled after him, but Raymond didn't turn around. He followed the crowd of students to the bus lot. He checked to make sure nobody was watching and then slipped into the trees. He found Rosie right where he had left her. He offered her the sausage patty, and she gladly accepted, licking his fingers in gratitude. Come on, girl, he said. He left his things concealed in the woods and headed toward the road. Raymond had never attended a middle school so secluded from the outside world. When it had been built many years before, most of the students came from farms in the area, so it was pretty far from town. He was careful to stay hidden in the woods for as long as he could manage, and then he stepped out into the sun. The town itself consisted of the Main Street Courthouse, a shop and save grocery store, a Baptist church, and a few random shops that sold antiques or odds and ends. He walked along the edge of the road with Rosie trailing behind him, occasionally darting after a squirrel. When he reached the road that led to town, he turned left in the direction of the sawmill where his father had been working for the past few weeks. When he made it to the mill, cars were pulling out of the parking lot, going home after the workday. The office trailer was still open, and he knocked once before he and Rosie walked in. No dogs allowed, the man behind the desk barked. Raymond jumped. Sorry, he said quickly, and led Rosie back outside and told her to wait on the porch. She obeyed, looking slightly annoyed. Back in the office, Raymond felt frazzled. On the walk over, he had thought about what he would say when he got there, but now that he was there, he didn't know where to start. Well, the man asked, looking at Raymond, what can I do for you? You're too small to work. Come back when you're older and your parents can sign off. Raymond would be 13 in June, but he didn't say anything. He was small for his age and had always been on the skinny side. He was used to folks thinking he was younger than he was. Besides, that wasn't why he was there. I'm looking for Ray Hurley, he asked. The man made a noise that was a mix between a snort and a laugh. You ain't the only one. He didn't show up for work today, and he asked for an advance yesterday for the rest of the month's wage. He shook his head. I shouldn't have given it to him. Should have known better. I'm too soft-hearted with the holiday coming up, and all too trusting always have been. Raymond wondered briefly if the man was related to Harlan. I'm taking care of his dog, and he didn't tell me when he would be back. Raymond had practiced this line on the way there. Bending the truth was something else he had grown used to over the years. With parents like his, it was downright necessary. Well, your guess is as good as mine, the man said. Raymond nodded. Do you think you could tell him that I'll be at River Mill Middle School when he comes back, He can find me there. I doubt he'll be showing his face around here if he does come back, but yeah, I'll tell him. Thanks, Raymond said, and he left the office. He thought about going to the bus station, but he didn't have any money. And besides, where would he go? He had never met any of his grandparents, and he didn't have any other family that he knew of. Plus, everything he owned was in the woods behind the school. The sun was beginning to go down when Raymond retrieved his duffel from behind the school and settled himself against a tree for the rest of the evening. The cold of winter hadn't set in yet, but Raymond zipped his coat all the way up anyway. He pulled his math notebook from his book bag and did his homework in the dimming light. He and Rosie shared the leftover roll for dinner, and he ate the orange Harlan had given him. He read from a book he had gotten at the school library about a blind boy who was shipwrecked on an island. When he could no longer see the pages, Raymond leaned his head against the tree and fell asleep.